Hi, Frank.
Hi, sweetheart. How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I am fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
I think that, honestly, the people here are priceless. The
so
people here have
nice.
been my greatest find so far.
A lot of people have never had money and they don't need money. So we get rejected like that a lot because, you know what? They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about your money. They never had it and never going to have it.
Frank Fritz helped build a television empire, but was quietly pushed out when he needed support the most. A friendship that lasted decades collapsed without warning. Rumors were confirmed, but only after the damage had already been done. And behind it all was a private battle that few people truly understood. So what really happened between Frank Fritz and the team behind American Pickers? And why did the truth only come out when it was already too late? Join us as we uncover what Frank Fritz revealed before his death. An unusual bond. Before everything fell apart, there was a friendship that didn't look like it could break. Frank Fritz wasn't built for television fame. Long before the cameras, he was already deep in a world most people ignored, quietly collecting pieces of history from barns, garages, and forgotten corners of Iowa. He started with small toys, oil cans, anything that carried a story. Over time, that instinct sharpened into something else. He could look at an object and know if it mattered. Things got bigger when American Pickers started in January 2010. Frank, alongside his friend Mike Wolfe, were the main stars of the show. Then came Danielle Colby. In the early years, her role was largely confined to the office, managing the antique archaeology shop in LeClaire, handling leads, and keeping the business running while the two men drove across the country in their van. Off camera, however, the three of them formed a tight unit. As the show progressed, they built a loyal fan base interested not only in the treasures they uncovered, but also in the personalities and stories behind the picking process. Within a short frame of time, American Pickers became a household name, and the team continued to expand their brand with each season. While everything seemed cool on screen, trouble began brewing behind the scenes. The show's success brought new challenges for the team, along with rising tension. The pressure of fame, the show's demands, and the growing complexity of their business began straining their relationships. The first signs of tension appeared with Frank. Though he had always been part of the show from the beginning, his relationship with the production team began to deteriorate. Frank, with his straightforward approach, started to feel uncomfortable with the direction the show was taking. Frank didn't like how much of the picking process was controlled and structured by the producers. He felt that the spontaneity of the picking trips was being sacrificed for the sake of producing a good show. His time on the show was soon riddled with more challenges. As episodes continued, his presence became increasingly inconsistent. At first, it was easy for audiences to assume it was a scheduling variation. Reality television often rotates cast members depending on the episode's focus and location. But over time, the gaps became more noticeable. He was no longer a constant presence in the way viewers had come to expect. When his appearances reduced, speculation naturally increased. Viewers began asking whether his role was changing permanently or whether something more structural was happening behind the scenes. The show, however, did not provide a detailed public breakdown of its internal decisions, leaving room for interpretation. The once united team was now facing challenges that threatened to tear them apart. While the team kept struggling to find a balance, another challenge emerged. Frank's health, which had always been a private matter, began to significantly increase his absence from filming. This was the beginning of the end. Everything else followed immediately. During this period, Frank eventually stepped away from filming entirely. The absence marked a clear shift in the dynamic that had defined the show from its early days. For many viewers, it felt abrupt, even though the process leading to it had been gradual. The official story about Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers was always incomplete, and the audience that had watched him for a decade deserved better than what they were given. And in the middle of this, Danielle Colby played an important role that indirectly contributed to the story. So what's the actual story? And what part did Danielle Colby play in it? The addiction nobody talked about. Everyone knew about the back pain that terrorized Frank Fritz. But his health problems did not begin with back surgery. They began considerably earlier, with a diagnosis that he kept private for years before finally going public with it in 2013. Crohn's disease had been part of Frank's daily life since the 1990s. The medications required to manage Crohn's weakened his bones over time, setting the stage for what came next, in ways that no one fully understood until the consequences were already in motion. In 2020, while handling heavy items at his Iowa home, Frank suffered a severe back injury. The spine that years of Crohn's medication had weakened was now in serious structural trouble. The surgery that followed left him with 185 stitches and 2 metal rods in his spine. The recovery process brought with it a prescription for painkillers that opened a door Frank Fritz found himself unable to close. He developed an opioid addiction during the recovery. It was the predictable consequence of serious pain medication given to a man whose body had already been compromised by a decade of chronic illness management. That does not make it less devastating. It makes it more understandable than the silence surrounding it ever allowed anyone to acknowledge at the time. When fans began to question why Frank left the show, Danielle Colby spoke up. In a now-deleted Instagram post, she shared her thoughts on what happened behind the scenes and explained why Frank was no longer part of the show. In the post, Danielle made it clear that Frank's absence from American Pickers wasn't because of a falling out with anyone, as many fans had believed. She explained that Frank's health problems were the real reason. According to her, Frank caused himself so much pain, which was difficult for her to watch. She shared that she had watched Frank struggle with his health for years, both physically and emotionally. Mike Wolf followed up with his own confirmation. In a People magazine interview, he said the real reason Frank never returned to American Pickers was his inability to pass the show's required drug tests. But there was a problem. When Frank came out of treatment at the Abbey Center, he said he was ready to come back to American Pickers. He said the show's runner had called him on his birthday in October and told him he would call back the next day. That call never came. The show had replaced him with Mike Wolf's brother, Robbie, and Frank Fritz found out the way everyone else did, from a public announcement. Nothing was the same again. The addiction was only part of the story. What had triggered next was far more personal. The bitter feud. Shortly before he left the show, Frank and Mike had a falling out in 2019. Frank gave an interview that revealed what he had been carrying in silence. He told the outlet that he had not spoken to Mike Wolf in 2 full years, a stretch of time that covered not only his surgery, but also the months of painful recovery that followed. What cut him the deepest was the absence of a simple phone call. Frank made it clear that Mike knew exactly how severe his back injury was, yet no one from the show, and certainly not his longtime picking partner, had reached out to ask how he was doing. Danielle Colby was silent on the matter at the time. Frank admitted that he felt like a number 2 rather than a friend, replaced without ceremony while he lay in a hospital bed, unable to bend over far enough to tie his own shoes. In his words, "I haven't talked to Mike in 2 years. He knew my back was messed up, but he didn't call to ask how I was doing. That's just how it is." That July, Mike posted on Instagram about his longtime co-star's exit from American Pickers. In his post, he said, "I will miss Frank, just like all of you, and I pray for the very best and all good things for him on the next part of his journey. But Frank was not gentle about his feelings on the matter. According to Newsweek, Fritz fired back, calling Mike's statement about missing him and praying for him something that had been written by someone else for Wolf. He added that in 10 years, Wolf had not said 5 nice things to him unless they were both laughing at someone else. Mike told the U.S. Sun in August 2021 that Frank's addiction issues were the root of their problems. "I would love to talk with him again. We would absolutely love to, but he just can't get it right," he admitted. Frank is just going through a lot personally with his addictions. It's unfortunate that he's made decisions that have made him the way he is. Even after Mike spoke up, Danielle Colby didn't immediately speak up. One would expect that, as the calming force of the group, she would mediate between the two sides and try to get her friends back together. But she didn't. When she finally spoke, fans agreed it would have been better if she had remained silent. First, she took to Instagram to share a photograph of herself with her arm around Mike Wolf on the road. She captioned the image with the unmistakable message that she loved spending time with him and was proud of how he had handled the last 12 years. She further added that she looked forward to many more years of rolling around this big blue marble together. That seemingly simple photograph was anything but accidental. Posted at the height of the public feud, it showed whose side she was on. Then she appeared on the Sailor Jerry podcast and offered what many interpreted as another veiled critique of her departed co-star. She said that in the entertainment industry, ego gets so real so fast, and that there had been times when she had to check herself or ask her daughter to help her read something without the tone. She never mentioned Frank by name during that conversation, but the timing of her comments made it nearly impossible for listeners not to draw a connection. Why did it have to be so soon after Frank's explosive departure and his public accusations against Mike? While the fallout between the friends was still on, Frank found himself with an even bigger challenge: the stroke that changed everything. On July 14, 2022, a friend arrived at Frank Fritz's home in LeClaire, Iowa, and found him sprawled on the floor, unable to speak. It was only a little over a year after his explosive interview. Frank had suffered a devastating stroke, which left him partially paralyzed, unable to move the right side of his body, and with his speech severely impaired. The complications from the stroke also exacerbated his long-standing Crohn's disease, creating a cascade of health crises that would define the final years of his life. He spent a month in the hospital before being transferred to a nursing facility, and the court documents filed by his friend Chris Davis in August 2022 described the situation with legal clarity that was also deeply human in its implications. Frank's decision-making capacity was so impaired that he was unable to care for his own safety or provide for necessities such as food, shelter, clothing, or medical care, and he could not make, communicate, or carry out important decisions concerning his own financial affairs. The man who had spent 12 years making snap decisions about antiques in cluttered barns across America could no longer decide what he needed to eat or how to manage his own money. An emergency conservatorship was granted, with Chris Davis named as guardian and Midwest One Bank appointed to manage Frank's financial affairs. The bank took control of the cash assets and credit accounts, demanded the ability to transfer funds to cover what were described as long-term skilled nursing care costs, and took over oversight of the Frank Fritz Fines antique store in Iowa that had been his business identity outside the television show. A wheelchair ramp was installed at his Iowa home. The conservatorship agreed to help replenish the store's inventory. The specifics of the arrangement were documented in court papers that painted the picture of a man whose entire independent life had been placed in other people's hands through no fault of his own. Mike Wolf announced the stroke on his Instagram account, telling the world that his friend was in the hospital receiving care. However, Frank was not happy about Wolf making the hospitalization public. The feud had not fully healed yet. Even at that moment, even with Frank Fritz in a nursing facility, unable to speak properly, the distance between the two men had not been completely closed. But nothing would hit harder than what happened to Frank. The reunion that came too late. After Frank suffered the stroke, Mike publicly wished him well on Instagram and asked fans to pray for him. By 2023, the duo was said to have patched things up in their relationship. Mike Wolf and Danielle Colby had one final chance to mend a fractured friendship with their longtime co-star and partner, while Frank was recovering from a stroke. There was no news of Danielle showing up, but for Mike, it was a bittersweet reunion. But the timing was cruel. Frank had another stroke and was found at his place, unresponsive. The official cause of death was late sequela of cerebral infarction, better known as a stroke, according to his death certificate, which was obtained by TMZ. The stroke was caused by cerebrovascular disease. The coroner also noted that he suffered from aortic stenosis and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which both played a role in his death. Aortic stenosis is a type of heart valve disease, according to Mayo Clinic, and COPD is an ongoing lung condition caused by damage to the lungs, according to the medical website. For Mike, the impact was deeply personal. Beyond the cameras, the fame, and the fortune of American pickers, he lost a friend, a collaborator, and someone who had helped build the empire he now leads. But his passing didn't bring closure. It opened the door to a new chapter no one had seen coming. The immediate aftermath. Before his death, Frank's interview showed that Danielle Colby didn't do anything to latch up their relationship during the bitter feud with Mike. After he died, however, she took to Instagram again. This time, she posted a photograph of 3 of them from the early years. She wrote that she would miss his ability to make everyone laugh, his love for talking tattoos, and his epic collections. But most of all, those little glimpses of vulnerability he showed from time to time. She called him a road dog and signed off with, "Rest in peace." There was no trace of the frustration that had marked some of her comments during the feud years, just a woman mourning a friend. Nearly a year after Frank's passing, Danielle had an interview with Newsweek and spoke more directly about the loss. She admitted that everyone missed Frank. His laughter and his sharp, witty personality had kept the trio together through all those years of filming. But according to her, what she missed most were the rare moments when Frank let his guard down completely. The aftermath of Frank's death had many sides to it. Frank Fritz was worth approximately $6 million. For someone who had spent his final 2 years in a nursing home under a conservatorship that controlled his financial decisions, the question of what he wanted done with that estate after his death became one that multiple parties now have very different answers to. Frank's lawyer had filed a will to be kept safe in October 2023, and a certificate approving that will was issued on October 2024, just weeks after Frank's passing. In December 2024, an attorney representing an unnamed friend of Frank's entered the probate case on that friend's behalf. In February 2025, a separate attorney filed a petition in probate, requesting that the will be set aside and invalidated, along with a demand for a jury trial to determine how the estate should be handled. The argument at the core of the challenge was that Frank lacked the legal mental capacity to create a valid will while under a conservatorship established specifically because his capacity was impaired. Frank's own father, Bill Fritz, filed a suit alleging that the will had been forged and that Frank did not have the legal capacity to sign it while under conservatorship. The caretakers and friends who had been managing his affairs countered that Frank had been coherent when the will was made and that the documents reflected his genuine wishes. Till today, No jury trial outcome has been confirmed. The estate of a man who spent his final years in a nursing home without the ability to manage his own affairs is now being argued over in Iowa courts by the people who claim to know what he would have wanted. The man who could not speak for himself during those years cannot speak for himself now either, and the courts will have to determine what justice looks like in the absence of a clear and uncontested statement of his intentions. That is not the ending fans would have written for him, but it is the reality of what the final chapter of his story looks like. He was sidelined by the show he helped build, got into a public feud with his best friend, and ignored other friends on the show. And now, even in death, his estate is the subject of a legal battle. Frank Fritz truly deserved better than what he was served. Did American pickers handle Frank's departure well? And would it have been different if Danielle Colby had spoken out earlier? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.